Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 8th session on Water Energy Nexus. I'd like to welcome Dr. Walid Saleh, the keynote speaker for this session, the first speaker. Dr. Walid Saleh holds PhD in Water Resources Management from Canada, author of several publications and chapters in many books, holds several positions, consulting positions in Canada, held, and since 1999, he is the regional coordinator for the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health Management, managed several water projects in the GCC and the wider Middle East region. Welcome, Dr. Walid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Good morning. Still we are in the morning session. I'm pleased to be here, and I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity and to share some of the experiences of others as well as the UNU experience when it comes to water and energy. The first part of my presentation basically is to set the stage to a study that we have done and carried here in the GCC in 1999 actually, and it was supported by the Office of Her Highness Sheikh Hamoza. Actually they sponsor that study, and the purpose was, or the objective is, to identify what is the most important issue that the GCC need to focus on. And we'll see later on what is the issue was identified. Obviously, we all know the unprecedented challenges that we have, mainly the water scarcity, which would lead obviously to many cases of waterborne illnesses. This is driven by, of course, the magnificent drive and growth and demand in the region and the beautiful cities we are building in Doha as well as in Dubai and others, which eventually obviously give rising to cost of energy, and because of the rising demand, there is obviously this will give more emphasis into and regulation when it comes to the waste, treated waste, whether it's municipal or others. And that is also coupled with a massive infrastructure to support all this development. Obviously, I mean, we know that the GCC is basically a desalinated, and many numbers I've heard from the idea and others that 60% of the industry is in the region. There is a population growth, whether it is natural growth as well as or expat coming into the region because of the huge growth and demand for expertise. This will obviously strengthen the efforts on the need for water policies, because the increase on water supply and needs need to be somehow regulated. It cannot run at the rate that it is running right now. And through the conference, we have heard some numbers that ranging from 550 to some they say 750 liters per day per person. This is a huge amount of water for such a scarce region. The interlinkages, obviously, due to the desalination, just the session before, there was some talk about the environmental impact of the industry, because still desalination is an industry, brine desalination, salinization of also of aquifer because of overpumping, which will affect eventually the agriculture. Oil spills, it's always a threat to both marine as well as the ecology, as well as for the intake of desalination. At the end of the day, both water and energy are interconnected. We need energy to produce water, and we need water also to produce the energy. These are GE, actually, these are from GE. They summarize some of the nexuses between the linkage between water and energy. I've just present them today to build up my case. They say that 6 to 18% of the city energy demand is used to produce and treat and transport water. So 6 to 18%. In some, actually, in the GCC, this figure is globally. For the GCC, obviously, the figures are much bigger than that, and it differs from one country to another. We hear them actually in the first day. In some countries, up to 40% of the energy is actually used to produce water and electricity. This also, the higher technology to treat impaired water also required a high demand for energy. And we have, obviously, in the GCC, they are using up to tertiary treatment, but there is some talks now to use RO and nanotechnology to treat this water, eventually to recycle it into the system, and they are talking about using it for agriculture, for example. And obviously, this is an energy demand. In other countries, obviously, the reservoirs, used, like, for example, the high dam in Egypt for electricity generation. I'm going to go very fast in the beginning because the time is a bit short. Power generation, this is also a global figure that more than 50% of the global industry water consumption is used to generate power. This is from industrial point of view. Obviously, also the production of oil in the region, of course, it requires a large quantities also of water. And in some cases, for example, in Oman, they say that they produce more water actually than oil. But this is just to give you how is the interlinkages between the two. This is also, this part is from the World Economic Forum, which held in Marrakesh in 2010. And it was focused on the water and security in the GCC. And they tackled the water infrastructure as vis-a-vis the water and energy. And they gave some recommendations. And for example, here, it's about the infrastructure. We all know that the water, it has to be, produced, whether it is from natural resources or desalination. To service that, obviously, needs an energy. Even when we need to produce, service it to the consumers, that would need energy. Obviously, the infrastructure and the demand is based on the growth in terms of the GDP and also the population. It is a very nice diagram that highlights the interrelationship. The risk description, according to that report, it was summarized as whether in terms of direct impacts on water scarcity. We all know that the resources to produce that and the GDP and the uses of this water, these are some of the issues they highlighted. Some major trends and uncertainties, it was also identified as the region, obviously, it's a high water deprived region, agricultural production, and we heard in the first day about the Qatari vision to produce their food through local, let's say, formula. And all that require a lot of, in terms of demand of energy, as well as the pressure on the infrastructure itself. Obviously, the efficiency is still, whether it is in the water sector or in the energy sector, need to be addressed to overcome the socio-economic and probably cultural issues when it comes to the GCC. The virtual water has already been explored, whether by purchasing farms in other countries and so forth. The integration water resource management, as we heard from the speakers, the second day, that is still there is lack of implementation. The fostering between demand and supply is still also there is. All of these basically present opportunities. When it comes to the energy security, also this is from the World Economic Forum, there is the availability, of course, of this energy, whether it's from fossil fuel all the way, all renewable energies, to access it, to converge it, and distribute it. That requires, obviously, a lot of even water as well as energy, and it's driven by the GDP growth and the population growth. Some of the direct impacts and indirect impact as per the report. It has been, the consumption, energy consumption in the region, obviously because of certain, because of the weather as well as, the living condition here in the region, and obviously the growth is really high. It has been estimated like 60% more energy intense than the whole OECD combined, which is really, amazing. These OECD are the greatest industrial countries of the world. Some of the trade-offs, again, that came out of these recommendations. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, we were commissioned in '99 by the Qataris, Her Highness Office, and we hired, actually there was 5 international experts who came to the region and spent 8 months and toured the whole region, and that was in 1999, early on. They identified that water and energy is the crucial issue for the region. And they have made some presentation, some suggestion, what can be done. Given, I've been visiting the region since '97. I've been living here since 2002. And each day I was hearing an opportunity like this. Desalination is the major industry. Desalination technologies are all imported. We need to do, our homework to have R&D when it comes, at least to service the industry that we are having here, desalination. Nothing had happened. Maybe there is some, here and there, some research ideas. What we suggested, or the study suggested, that to establish then research, R&D center on water and energy. And basically, it is not a conventional center. It's not just like sitting a group of people who carry out research and basically publish papers and probably promoted themselves, etc. The whole setup is to have a small core of researchers, highly qualified, and then you have different research labs. Each research lab will host a company, and company, private sector company, whom they have a lead when it comes to R&D. And actually, we did, walk the road to see how these companies would be interested. And we were targeting companies who have direct relation when it comes to desalination and energy in the region. For example, one of the companies we took was GE, General Electric. As you know, they purchased Xenon Water, which is a major Canadian company. Okay, just to give you a brief, Xenon Water was the owner or the founder of that company was a professor at McMaster University, which is, I know him very well. From his own research, he established Xenon, which eventually, before he died, he sold for $600 million, and it was #1 when it comes to wastewater treatment in North America. And obviously now it does exist in the region. So we have to create or change the mindset of ours, that R&D is an investment. It's just like building a factory that you sell aluminum or we sell whatever. I'm not shy to give you an example how, and I'm sure you all agree with me. Pfizer, when they did research to establish the blue pill, everybody we know, how much they spent on R&D? 100 million? 200 million? How much they are selling it now for? How much the revenue per year now? When we actually try to market this center and the idea that eventually this center will create money. It will create technologies. These technologies will be marketed and will be a spin-off companies. And then eventually, maybe we're going to have the whole industry of desalination technology hosted in the GCC. Now, some of the issues were identified from the way they assemble the center, that they will have water, pure water research issues, energy research issues, and overlapping issues. Some of the water issues, as you can see, which is pretty much address most of the issues that has been mentioned in this conference for the past 2 days. And also, I embedded some of the question, because also that was an option, and it was studied some time ago. And as you know, like 20 years ago, Turkey has suggested that to supply the region with water, the peace pipeline, as they call it. Recently, the Blue Peace report, even though I mean, there is different opinion about this report, which is published by the Foresight Group of India. They made an estimate that Turkey, they can afford to export without the Euphrates and the decrees about 1 to 1.5 billion cubic meter per year from other sources to the region. By the way, recently they just established a regional water council, which is basically Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq. It is non-government center, basically, to start the dialogue and see how they can solve some of the differences. In the energy issues, these were the priority areas that was identified by the research team, from the optimization of the energy all the way. Of course, the training and education is also an important issue to support the sustainability of this center, and also the other aspect which is interesting about this center, which is actually, I was sitting yesterday with Dr. Bishnaq. He's a well-known industrialist also in desalination, and he was mentioning that we are trying to establish some kind of a hub between different research institutions in the region to work together in well-identified projects, and somehow it is slow. Well, maybe if there is a lead center like this center, because also this center was suggesting that to set up the research based on identified projects in collaboration with the existing research institutes that is in the region. And we have many. We have Qatar in Kuwait, we have King Abdulaziz or city in Saudi Arabia, and of course we have in Qatar, we have many, and now we have Masdar and others. But the GCC have the same conditions, the same situation. We're all in the same boat. Why don't we have this research hub created to at least share whatever experiences that we have and to face the challenges we all have? And the energy issues, smart grid, et cetera, which is what I'm going to go fast on this, because already I think Mr. Hamad Al-Atiyah in the first, when he showed us, if you remember the sustainability matrix, the solution that he was suggesting, actually, it is all in here, because he was talking about capacity building, water issues, and energy issues, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we are still shy in the region and the private sector. The private sector is the driver. I mean, at the end of the day, if we are commissioning a desalination plant, we have to deal with the private sector. Now we are talking about nuclear power plants to do desalination and energy. We still have to deal with the private sector. Can't we have some kind of a partnership with them? Is there an assessment done to see how we can, this relationship can be built? How can we set up this relationship? Maybe the idea of the center of building small labs within the center is acceptable. Because I remember when we talked to GE, for example, and I did talk with the head of R&D in New York, and he said, we have this idea, we would like to establish this center of excellence for research on water and energy. And he said, once you establish, I'll be the first one to move with you. I have a budget of R&D of $300 million. I would love, to me, as a GE, the Middle East region is, from a business point of view, is a priority. Therefore, I'm willing to partnership with such center. So there is a way to make this happen. And at the end of the day, as I said, we cannot, and any of the challenges are huge to any of our countries. I mean, just the water storage by itself, to me, is a scary thing. Doha, with all the hundreds of billions of dollars that's being invested to make such a magnificent city, it has a storage of water for 2 days. To me, this is alarming. Same thing situation in Dubai, and same thing in probably Kuwait is 6 days, which is the largest. But without some kind of regional approach, and we have the umbrella, we have the GCC. The GCC can be the driver to implement some of these policies. Again, which is about, I mean, for example, I mean, why this idea actually, His Highness Prince Al Hassan always called that we should establish a community of water and energy. And he basically built his vision on, or opinion about the same what happens in 1955 between Germany and France when they set up the community of steel and coal, and which end up now as the European Union. So maybe this can be replicated since we do have the GCC umbrella as there. Some concluding remarks. Obviously, problems in the region, water and energy security is a serious issue, and I don't think it is still addressed properly, or I think it should have more attention than what is being given to it right now. There should be, obviously, it will have impact on the interest and the stability of the region. Water issues cannot be separated from energy because of the situation in the region. And achievement of this goal will still leave millions of people without water and energy security obviously this is not for the GCC, but in other countries. The Millennium Development Goals, we still, even in the Arab region, we are not up to some, of course, there is differences between countries in this when it comes to achieving the Millennium Development Goals. I'll be happy to answer any of your inquiries, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Next keynote in this special session on water energy nexus is Dr. Thamer Shaibi. So Dr. Shaibi, please come for your keynote. Well, Dr. Shaibi is the head of the Department of Rural Engineering at the National Research Institute for Agriculture Engineering, Water and Forestry in Tunisia. He obtained his PhD from the Swedish University of Agricultural Science in the field of agricultural engineering and climate technology. He has been appointed in 2008 to serve the African Union in developing and coordinating processes in science and technology and innovation policy in Africa. He is representative of the African Academy of Science in Northern Africa and fellow of the Third World of Academy for Science. He served in various capacities as an associate member of the Environmental Security Panel under the NATO Science for Peace and Security and the European Commission Frameworks programs. Dr. Thamer, you have 20 to 25 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the organizer to give me the opportunity here to be present in this big event. It's really an honor for me. And I will speak about the water and energy system analysis. I think that it will be hard for me just because after 2 days brainstorming, working for and discussing the issue of the water and energy, so I suppose that you have come already about all the crucial problems related to all these aspects. But what I am trying now to do is to present the relationship or the link between water and energy, and I will focus mainly on the aspect of the renewable energy, which is really the big potentials, especially in the MENA regions, to use it for closing the gap between the water energy supply and the energy security. I think that with this, you know that the water resources status in the MENA regions, that is really a big issue. And what I wanted to mention is this, the countries in the MENA region, that 14 out of the top of 20 water sources, water scarce countries are in MENA. So what is the reasons for the water scarcity? The reason is the insufficient rainfall and high evaporation, the excessive withdrawal, a fast-growing population, and the growing demand. That's the main reasons for water scarcity in the regions. What is the consequence? So after having the reasons, it's very important also to mention what the consequence for having with the fact that there is really water scarcity is the degradation of the natural systems, the contamination of the groundwater, the reduction of crops, and the damage of the soil, which is not really very easy to be recovered. And without also forgetting these, the water conflicts, that we can have really water conflicts when it comes to the water scarcity. So it's important to note that in many parts of the MENA, which is scarce of water, and it's getting more and more scarcity, water is becoming a challenge to grow. A challenge to growth with low use efficiency, so especially the water resources are used in agriculture. It's about 80% of these resources are used in agriculture. Unfortunately, this water is not really well used, so the efficiency is a bit low, and it's even lower than 50%. And also the losses in water supply systems, it's over 30%. So, and this mainly is due to the very low infrastructures. So I mean that we are really, we are losing the water. So the water which is available in the region is not really well efficient use. So we have really to think about how we can use our water efficiently. And also there is another issue is about the subsidized. So the water and energy here are really subsidized. And when we have something which is subsidized, I think that it encourages people to use it without taking care of the precious, taking care of these precious resources which is available. So when it comes now to the energy, so there is four sectors that it uses energy. So mainly we use for our energy for pumping, for treatment of wastewater, and also the energy is needed also for transport and also for desalinations and either for the brackish or for the seawater. So I will give you an overview about the energy consumptions and the energy resource and consumptions in the MENA region. So it will be hard really to think about all the regions. That's because in all the regions, the countries are really have different conditions. So you may know that in MENA region is very rich in natural resources, but unfortunately they are unequally distributed. So I can give you just an idea about these resources. So we have 57% of the world proven water reserves and 41% of the natural gas resources. However, these great gaps exist between countries rich in natural resources and countries which is dependent on such resources, such as mainly in North Africa and in Yemen. And also there is a good access, but unbalanced. So we are lucky that the average electrification rate is about 90%, and many countries are performing close to 100%. But an estimated 28 million people are still lack of access to electricity, especially in rural areas. So because for me, I'm much more interested in this population, in these rural areas. So perhaps I will focus a bit on these areas where there is really a lack of infrastructures, a lack of energy, there is no access to the electricity, and that's very important because it's good also to speak in cities, but we have not also to forget these populations, which are very important also to mention it. And also, there is a little efficiency of this environmental friendliness because we know that the carbon intensity are on average higher, and the efficiency of the electricity, efficiency of supply of the electricity is a bit low. Also, another aspect is about the burden of the electricity sector on the government finance is still increasing in many countries and is becoming unsustainable. And also, as it has been mentioned by our colleagues previously, there is a lack of the private investment. So the private sector's participation in the power sectors remains very low. So now, when it comes to the renewable energy in MENA, so from this figure you can have really an overview about how much we have as a resource of renewable in our regions. And we can note that wind energy and solar energy are really the main resources that will be available in our regions. Unfortunately, these renewable energy are negligible and represent less than 0.1% of the total energy supply and less than 0.3% of the electric power capacity. So this energy is not really well used in our regions. So the future is for renewable energy. So we can really note from this that the future is for renewable energy, especially in our region. And since the water scarcity and the energy concerns, so we have really a lot of research. So people and all of the scientists are starting to be more and more interested in this renewable energy. And the last decade, we have really huge of productions of books, publications, and all this related to this aspect. So when it comes to the water and energy systems, it's already also mentioned that really there is a link between the energy production requires water, and the water production and distribution requires energy. So both of them, we have not really to treat them separately. So both of them, they're really closely linked. And the energy production requires water, especially for cooling, extraction of mining, hydropowers, and for the water production, distribution requires also energy, mainly for the treatments and pumping and transport, as it's mentioned. So this aspect should be really addressed in coherent and sustainable way. So here so I will give you just the aspect why we are going for the renewable energy. So the high cost of the standard fuels plus the depletion of these energy sources, plus the environment degradation, plus the lack of powers. And when it comes to the energy, we have limited water, especially physically fragile water resources. Water is really intensified utilized, and rising demand, and also the climate change, the threats of the climate change. So this is led to the government is seeking to another potentials for using the renewable energy sources for desalinations, for alleviating water stress, and to incorporate also the renewable energy desalinations for development programs. So here we can see, as I said, that you have mainly in North Africa. So I have no idea about what is situation, especially here in the Gulf countries, and especially because there is not really a great link of collaborations or exchanging data between this area and the Gulf countries. But what I may mention that there is also many places where decentralized desalinations based on the alternative energy could be crucial for rural development. So in rural development, it will be very interesting to use the renewable energy. So, and this renewable energy or this desalination units would require, if you want to use it in rural areas, so it has to be a bit in special conditions, and it has to be operated simply and with a high reliability. So now I will start by the system. So I will talk about the system for desalinations. The desalinations, it has started since the Egyptians. They have, it is the Pharaoh epoch. So they have discovered the greenhouse effect, and this we can see from this figure that it's a solar seeds. That is the basic one for producing fresh water. So it's we can capture the solar energy, and we can heat water inside the still and recuperate all this vapor to be condensed and recuperate some of energy. But this aspect is that's the basic one for the solar desalinations. But after the modern physics, so we have different systems. So we can see the renewable energy, the osmosis rosette, the ED, MACF, VC, and others, and different potential for renewable energy, such as the solar energy, the wind energy, the hybrid, and the solar thermals. And from this, we can give you an idea about this renewable energy. So mainly the RO is the mainly used for producing the fresh waters when it comes to the solar energy sources. So what is the consensus for using desalination unit to renewable energy? So it's a non-steady state, and this adds to the complexity of these systems, and there is a limitation in the production of water quantity. Another also constrained by the financial aspects, and this is require high engineering and manufacturing costs, and high initial cost, and also the project financing is not always possible because of low returns. And the environmental also constraints about the physical site where we have to put this unit to respect also the environmental conditions, and the social aspect is if the social also they can accept this. Okay. So. So unfortunately, what is the situation of the renewable energy, the desalination unit using renewable energy? So still, all these systems are beyond the experimental phase, and they are in pilot projects. And almost all of them, they are built for test purposes, and most of them are taking place under higher supervised and financial conditions. So I can give you some of the units or small units which could be used also, which are really in the phase of research aspects. So they are a bit, there's pilots. So the first one, which is a solar unit for supplying rural areas. That's in the south of Tunisia. Another one, so which is in the middle, so using the geothermal energy. It's a low enthalpy for producing some fresh water. And we have also the greenhouses, so we can also use the greenhouses, the roof of the greenhouses as a collectors. So we can use the collectors to produce also the fresh waters, and also to controlling the climate inside the greenhouses. And also this one, which is new, it's under research in our team here, is to use the vapor and to condensate it in soil. So we can use the vapor, heating the water using solar energy, and after they recuperate this vapor and inject it in the soil to be condensated and use it for irrigation. And now when it comes to the large and the medium scale, which is more than 1,000 cubic meters per day, so I think that in the Gulf country they are a pioneer in these systems. So we have different, the MED, MCF, desalination technology, which is well proven, and this large-scale seawater desalination can be used also to close the demand and supply gaps. So for improving this technology to be more energy and water efficient, to close the demand supply gap, so we have two aspects. So either working for desalination systems or working to the new one. It's not really new, but it's really an updated technology about using the concentrated solar power, which is based on the solar energy. And for improving also the desalination system, you can have the introduction of the hybrid systems. So here are the situations, and you can see the dominant technology worldwide, but it doesn't mean that this MSF is the best one. So it's really, but it's really the most spread one. For the hybrid systems in winter, so operation different power and water network requires. Operation configuration becomes very inefficient, and limited flexibility is allowed by the combined heat systems. So the hybrid system, so we can use the hybrid system as a simple hybrid system or integrated one. So now I will introduce this CSP. So the CSP, the concentrated solar power, so it's limited in the many of the major development countries. So we can see it mainly in the MENA region, in the north. So we have the north. So all these regions, so they have the favorable conditions to develop the concentrated solar powers, and it has a high potentials for applications, and the technology exists in MENA. So here we can see some projects which is under constructions and the planning phases, and in Tunisia, North Africa, Tunisia, Algeria, and Egypt, also in Jordan. and in Abu Dhabi. So this is, and I don't know, so there is a big project which is Desert Tech in North Africa, so how you can really convert the desert to supply also energy and to export it to Europe. And this is really a good potentials. So that's a figure of the integrated debris options. So what is the action plan for introducing the desalination plants? The priority is going towards water catchment management, promote water saving, and intensify water demand management. Nonetheless, desalination is increasingly seen as a viable water supply option and becoming increasingly cost competitive. So what is the action plan? The priority is for pricing policy to improve the water supply, encouraging investments and investors, upgrading industrial aspect and create knowledge basis. So as a conclusion, so we have, I think that we can focus on the three main issues. For the relevance, the water issues cannot be separate from energy issues. So both of them are really interlinked, and this really has even previously mentioned. And the energy is the major cost item for the desalination water. Considerable effort must be identify appropriate energy and technology options needed to meet water security needs. And it's very important also to sensibilize the civil society and the relationship between the renewable energy and economic development. For the system innovations, the system innovations are the main keys for transformation change, and significant progress put great emphasis on the technology innovation of clean and green technology, which is really lagging behind. And also making education and research relevant to the region challenge and opportunities. And the partnership, which is, I insist on the partnership, as really the regions, especially the Gulf region, are the pioneer in the desalination. They have really a lot, so they can really, we can make profit from especially from our part, from North Africa, to make this collaboration and to work together, and both at the level of the university, private, public sector partnership in these regions, also including also the North-South partnership. And for the challenge, both things, how to put water in minds of people. Water is very precious, that's very important. So because as I have mentioned, there's a lot of losses. So we have really to think about these resources and really have to evaluate it, and also how to put forward to sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tamer, for your valuable presentation. And now I would like to introduce Mrs. Carol Shushani. She is Chief of the Water Resource Section in the Sustainable Development and Productivity Division at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, ESCWA, in Beirut, Lebanon. Her current work focuses on supporting Arab regional initiatives on shared water resources management, climate change, and water supply and sanitation. She previously served as team leader of the Technology and Enterprise Development team in the same division. Prior to joining ESCWA, she worked for the Harvard Institute for International Development. She holds degrees from Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Boston, and Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. Her doctoral research was on trade and environment issues facing the Arab region. Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. We've been hearing a lot over the last couple of days about various technologies as well as larger strategies for addressing this linkage between water and energy. And I think we've had some very interesting debate on both levels of analysis about this topic. What I'd like to introduce you here is some regional frameworks being pursued at the Arab regional level, and given the Gulf is within the context of the Arab, there might be an opportunity for exchange and maybe collaboration on certain work being undertaken at the Arab level to address water and energy challenges and information to contribute to that. So with that, I'll provide a very brief introduction, a couple of points just to think about on the linkages, since we've had some very good presentations already, and then focus on three challenges. Really, the water supply and sanitation story, shared water resources, which we have to think about within our water-scarce region, climate change, impacts on water resources, and initiatives related to each of those three pillars, and then provide a little bit more about prospects for regional cooperation on this topic. Well, we've already heard a lot, and we heard earlier today even from Dr. Walid about the idea of the linkage between energy and water, that one is mutually reinforcing. We also have to talk, of course, about the water security dimension, because as we think about sustainable production and consumption, we also have to think about resources not only related to energy and water, but also related to land. And we should not also forget marine resources, which are part of the story. So again, the key stories to think about here are production, consumption, and making that sustainable and the interdependency, transmission and distribution. We heard about the costs related to that for both water and energy. And not to forget the environmental externalities that might be associated with pursuing options in those subjects. Something that I know was discussed at the last WSTA conference, but still remains a very important issue, is the climate change dimension. We've given a lot of lip service to the issue of climate change, but maybe there's a need for further analysis on that, because this is also fundamentally a water and energy story. When we think about climate change impacts and mitigation and adaptation, we don't only have to think about the natural causes, of course, but the anthropogenic causes caused by energy emissions, various sectors, how that affects the climate. That in turn affects the water resources, and of course, when the water resources are affected, you need more energy again to respond to evaporation, higher temperatures, etc. So we have to also maybe, and we're suggesting to provide more information about those linkages within the context of the water energy story. And not only within climate change over the long term, but the implications for extreme events, like the floods that we're seeing a lot more frequently in the Gulf. Another line of argument as an economist I'd like to highlight is we also have to think about decoupling the story that increased GNP and all the growth that is happening in the region should not in tandem mean a growth in consumption of our basic natural resources. So while GDP is increasing and there's development despite the financial crisis recently, energy use should not be increasing exponentially at the same time, much less water use. So we also have to think about a paradigm that decouples water and energy consumption from GDP growth through efficiency improvements, technology transfer, and whatnot. So in the strategic sense, what's going on here? Again, the GCC, the Gulf countries are part of the Arab region. We had the League of Arab States representatives here with us earlier during the week. And what I'd like to talk about is some initiatives that through the Arab Ministerial Water Council are being initiated at the Arab regional level on this topic and related topics. For those of you who aren't very familiar about the Arab Ministerial Water Council, it was requested to be established at the Arab Summit in 2008. The first session was just in 2009. It's a very new ministerial council. The first session was in Algiers. Just last year, the Arab Water Security Strategy was adopted, and now we are in the course of supporting the League of Arab States at ESCWA and others on the preparation of an action plan to formalize the strategy. But let's stay at the strategic level right now. Inside the Arab Water Security Strategy, it specifically says and seeks to encourage greater research on desalination and the use of renewables for energy, renewable energies for desalination, which is something happily that we've heard a lot during this meeting. It also calls for increased scientific research in the Arab region on the linkages between sanitation and energy, with a view towards encouraging locally appropriate technologies. We heard some, again, about sanitation and energy in terms of wastewater treatment. We might also think about bioenergy, which I'll just bring up briefly afterwards. And also the strategy identifies key issues such as food security, of course, shared water resources, climate change, impact assessment, and adaptation. So going to the first challenge about water supply and sanitation. We all know the figures. The figures for the Millennium Development Goal Report all says that everyone is having, well, not everyone, everyone in the GCC countries and most of other countries in the region are really doing well in terms of performance, in terms of access to water supply and sanitation services. There's some laggards, of course, in the least developed countries, but the figures say that we're doing really well. And this is also contributing to perhaps maybe a shifting in interest at the global level regarding whether investment in water should increase and maybe not into other sectors, because supposedly we're meeting a lot of our goals in this sector. And where is this also, we have to think about those numbers, but think about what is actually happening in reality in our region, because in fact, these figures are not reflecting the vulnerability Desalinization in the end is a very vulnerable sector in case there's risk. The continuity of the service. We've always heard about Jordan and Palestine getting water for 1 or 2 times a week, much less the quality of the service and whether that water is actually potable. So I'm going to highlight a couple issues and mention an initiative that's being developed to address that concern. I'm not going to dwell on this. We've talked enough about desalinization, but obviously desalination is possible because of the access to energy. There's high energy consumption levels here, and the trade-offs related to water and energy have to not only be thought of within the Gulf context, but what about the implication of desalination through nuclear energy, which is the new topic? What types of threats to marine, much less land and human communities would we need to think about when we think about this nexus? We haven't really talked about the energy component here, but this is fundamental and an emerging issue for our region in terms of need to access water and deliver water and clean water and desalinate water, transmit it, when there is a dearth of energy resource in some countries, or a need to maybe export those resources and use nuclear energy perhaps for domestic purposes. Another topic I haven't heard much about is the biofuel story, and I know we're in the Gulf, and there is not only concern here, but also throughout the region about this development of biofuels, primary biofuels, using the sugar cane, using the sugar beet, using all types of corn to develop fuels and as an alternative for traditional fuels or even renewable fuels, being debated whether it's renewable. Well, there is a position at the Arab level through the Arab Agricultural Development Organization and a declaration by the Ministers of Agriculture, which is echoed through water, that primary biofuels should not be pursued. We should not be using land and even coastal marine resources to develop primary biofuels because we have issues regarding water scarcity, land resources. Should they be allocated to primary biofuel production versus opportunities for income generation for farmers? Food security issues. We should not reallocate resources away from cultivations that are for food, for consumables versus energy. And of course, marine resources. I know there's some research and development, for example, in the region on algae on the coastal areas. Well, thinking about algae for biofuel production versus having a cleaner environment for desalinization. This is a trade-off again. Are we doing energy or water for drinking? So what is being promoted is the idea of second-generation biofuels, which does serve and have some potential. It reduces solid waste, obviously, when we're thinking about agricultural solids that can be converted to energy. So this sugarcane stalks, for example, or the sugar beet peels. Dates, the date pits are being considered as a means to generate energy. Wastewater sludge, we've heard a lot about the treatment, but the sludge itself can be used in terms of an energy source. And of course, when we're using second-generation biofuels and creating another use for that, we are protecting groundwater resources, which by avoiding more landfills and leachate into the groundwater resources, and that of course has win-win benefits. And then a final point here I'd like to emphasize when we think of water supply sanitation and the linkages is really the pumping. The water operators think about this primarily, but sometimes the policymakers forget about the importance and the cost of pumping. And a lot of the countries in the region, maybe not so much in the Gulf GCC countries, but having enough energy to pump your water is a crucial concern. Several countries in the Arab region are not having energy 24/7. And that's not only for domestic use, but for industries and for the water operators. So we've found, for example, that intermittency of the energy supply actually affects the ability to deliver water in Sana'a. And the loss can run even to 30% and almost 250,000 people because the expectation, you can see the expectation of full energy access actually was not realized, so the pumps could not operate, the systems were closed, the pipes were drained, unaccounted water flow increased, and leaks increased, resulting in fact in a reduction in the ability to deliver water because of a power issue. 5 minutes only? Okay. So we mentioned unaccounted water. So the initiative we have here right now on water supply sanitation is called the MDG Plus initiative. We have a couple new indicators that have been developed to focus on this topic. Continuum of supply we mentioned, distance from source, which also has an energy implication. On the shared water resource story, we have two initiatives I'd like to mention. We have to think about the trade-offs for surface water and groundwater in terms of our ability to manage our resources. And what ESCO has been doing with BGR is actually develop a new map of shared water resources in the Western Asia region to identify and update the information that exists. And we need to think about this because the trade-offs obviously exist for hydropower, irrigation, linkages to food security within the shared water context. And then within the groundwater resource, we also have to think, because groundwater is fundamental as a source of fresh water for the Gulf. And something like 19 aquifers and aquifer systems have been identified in the region. And the way to determine whether this should be used for rural development, agriculture, or drinking, or other land uses is fundamental in terms of finding those trade-offs. Interestingly, to identify the groundwater resources, geological maps developed by the petroleum sector were even used to inform the water assessment. So it's interesting, even on the research side, the collaboration on water and energy. And to that end, just to build on that, there's a legal framework that the League of Arab States and ESCO is supporting on improving the management of shared water resources between Arab countries. More information is available on that in the ESCO Water Development Report. Copies are over there if you'd like afterwards. The final point is about climate change. I don't think I need to introduce about the 101 about mitigation, adaptation, and whatnot. But what is interesting is that we have to think about the fact that the information available for the Arab region is really not as comprehensive as it should be. So what we've done with a series of partners that will be noted shortly is develop a regional initiative to assess the impact of climate change on water resources and vulnerabilities in the Arab region, so that Arab countries from Morocco to Iraq to Yemen to Oman can all speak in one voice with a baseline of information for assessing really what climate change means for our water. The project involves a knowledge management assessment, capacity building, and awareness raising. And fundamentally, it takes global modeling and develops several regional climate modeling outputs to feed into regional hydrological models, vulnerability assessment, and then develop integrated maps so you in your everyday work can identify the hotspots and talk with your colleagues at the Arab regional level on what really climate change means for our resources in the Arab regional level. I won't dwell on the science here, but in the end, remember that global climate modeling happens through various projections as to how much energy and other emissions are released into the atmosphere. There'll be different projections being used as the basis for analysis, and it will feed into hydrological modeling outputs. And why this is so important is that when you think about it, the IPCC reports on climate change do not reflect the Arab region. You can see how we're divided into 2 or 3 different segments. There's never been an assessment of climate change impacts that can be compared consistently, again, throughout the region. They're subnational, sub-regional, but not Arab region. So what we have done already is establish something new called the Arab domain. It's not the MENA domain, it's not the Middle East domain. We were very pleased to be able to call it the Arab domain that allows now all researchers around the world to platform and conduct climate modeling at the Arab regional level. So this information that's going to come out next year from the modeling will feed into a vulnerability assessment that addresses various aspects. And the partnerships involved in that work are here, and one of our partners, for example, UNESCO and UNEP are already with us in this meeting. So what is the prospects? Just 1 minute or 2. The prospects for the future are promising. As I mentioned, there is a water security strategy for the next 20 years already being sought for development. We had a first meeting already under the leadership of the government of Iraq, was the chair, and led by ACSAD, to identify the pillars that could be going into this Arab water strategy. Energy and water linkages addressed are on each of these levels, whether it's provision of water services, IWM, science, technology, funding, or climate change. All of those have a water energy dimension. Second, there's a lot of opportunities in terms of the integration of energy networks. You probably know about these already in the Gulf, but as you improve access to energy and power and electricity grids, you're also increasing the reliability of access to services for water and sanitation. And third, ESCO right now has been requested by its own intergovernmental process outside of the League of Arab States. We have a committee of water resources, we have a committee of energy resources comprised of representatives from each of our 14 member countries. And they have asked us, much like what happened with UNU in 1999, they have asked us to redefine what are the priorities for the region on water and energy, to develop a research program on this, and we will actually be meeting for this meeting, this intergovernmental consultation at the end of June. So with that, I'd like to conclude by just saying there's 4 major priorities here in terms of the strategic linkages to think about: monitoring assessment, increased R&D and investment for improved efficiency, integrated management of water and energy resources, and of course the importance of regional cooperation. So with that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Keller, for the comprehensive presentation, certainly providing in-depth analytical discussion of the prospects and challenges for promoting links between water and energy in the region. Well, the next speaker in this special session on water and energy nexus is Dr. Feda Ali. Well, she will be presenting a paper titled Qatar Water Challenges. Dr. Feda, please proceed to the podium. Well, Dr. Feda Ali is an expert chief researcher holding a PhD in material science and engineering from University of London. She has extensive combined experience in academia, atomic energy, and heavy industry, and finally at the Ministry of Science and Technology in Baghdad, Iraq, served as lecturer, researcher, executive director of Casting Research Center, project manager, and consultant. Well, Feda joined Qatar Foundation in the mid-2006 to establish Qatar National Research Fund and worked as a program manager, industry and engineering, besides heading the environmental group of Arab expatriate scientists, then as manager research division, and currently as a research scientist at Qatar Environment and Energy Research Institute. Well, Dr. Feda, you have 15 minutes to make your presentation. I understand you don't have it on.
Well, the presentation is to highlight on challenges in development despite all the hindrances that are shared between the GCC countries. Well, we can see what they put the problems in water is the increase in the population, and we can see the accelerating rate of people population in Qatar, and this is the table showing the increase in population between 1908 and 2011. The main water resources in Qatar, for the rainfall, it's very fluctuating, and it's very minute as well, and we cannot rely on it, and we can see these are the rainfall over the last few years, between not few years, 2 decades, and the average is 82 annual 82 millimeter annually. The groundwater is another source, and we can see it's located into 3 different areas. One is the what we call it the north area, north basin, and here's the salinity is fair between 500 to 3,000 part per million, and sometimes up to 10,000 part per million near coast due to the seawater, and this covers 19% of Qatar area at depth between 10 to 40 meter, while the south area, it's the south basin is salinity is high, considered high, and it's covered around half of the land in Qatar, and not suitable for agriculture because of the salinity. And there are 3 main basins, or small basins. One shared with the Saudi Arabia. And here are the water at the depth between 22 up to 80 meters below ground. And the salinity sometimes come to 4,000 parts per million at the depth between 450 and 650 meters in this area shared with Saudi Arabia. The groundwater, the average rainfall, and the groundwater and the average rainfall, if we sum it together, it will be the whole renewable source for the water between 1972 up to 2005 is around 58.1 million cubic meter, while the extraction of water from the south and the north area is around 220.2 million cubic meter, and that goes between 2004 and 2005. And so it's very obvious that the recharge or the renewable water for the consumption is about fourth. Then water abstraction, many times natural groundwater recharge rate, and continued over-exploitation of the groundwater reserve threatened the remaining reserve for water and from salt water intrusion, while overuse of the groundwater for agriculture is resulting in soil salination and desertification. And here are the number of wells for water extraction, increasing in number. But we can see the declines in the quantity of the water and the number of wells started at 2002 because of the salinity of the groundwater and it's more scarce and lowering the level of the groundwater. The wastewater, all population have a clean drinking water access. 68% of all Qatari buildings connected to sewage network, 55% Doha building connected. 1/3 of municipality water is treated and recycled, only 1/3 of it. Balance is lost as leakage or from building not connected to the sewage system. Most of supplied water has potable quality, misused in services that doesn't need this high quality, like garden irrigation, car washing, toilet flushing, and others. Treated wastewater capacity, it's also increasing, but it's coming to 140,000 and 150,000 cubic meter per day in 2005. We remain on 2 main sewage plant treatment or wastewater treatment, and then the rest are here. All the stations available in Qatar, and the total capacity. And there is a new one also building, new one is building now under construction around the airport area. And that will come to increase the wastewater treatment plant, expected to be increased up to 129 million cubic meter. The use of treated wastewater, we can see that it's mainly to irrigate 2 main farms here, and then 17% also in Doha for landscaping, and the other is just like, disposal. Desalinating seawater, that's the 4th source of water. The first plant has been built at 1953, and more plants are added. Until now, the capacity is around 1.5 million cubic meter per day at 2011. Large capacity combined with gas turbine, and what we call it the gas turbine combined cycle power plant, called cogeneration. power desalinating plant. And these are, this figure represents the increase in the production capacity in desalinating water between 2006 and 2010. Yeah. Okay. Desalinating plants in Qatar are here with all the capacity, and that's the electricity generation, and then the water desalination, and that's per year. Desalinating water is hardly bearing, you know, well, keeping pace with the increasing in population. And we can see that desalination energy consumption is really high, mainly based on natural gas, and with the CO2 emission. And here are all the calculations where you can see, I mean, how much at 2010, the electricity production by gigawatt, and then the desalinated water by million cubic meter. The CO2 emission is also high. And one thing I want you to remember, that the equivalent consumption of electric power per meter cube or desalination of water by multi-stage flash is 20 kilowatt per hour per cubic meter. And these are the consumption, all the average, the total equivalent, and the desalination share 21% of the power generation exhausted or being used to the desalination process. So the combined power desalination plant consume natural gas about 11% of total produced natural gas in 2009, and about 40% of total natural gas consumption in Qatar. And these are to continue on these figures, showing the contribution of the high energy consumption for this desalination process with the high emission of CO2. And here to remember that the average reverse seawater reverse osmosis consume about quarter the energy required for multi-stage flash water desalination, because it's around 5%, 5 kilowatt hour per cubic meter. These are the arrangement of the gas turbine combined cycle. And these are the steam generator with the gas turbine. And this is the backup pressure steam turbine. And water storage capacity in Qatar is almost for, well, 1 day, and it's shared between the reservoir, the ground tank, the elevated tank, the water tower, and it's coming in this figure. And the water use and consumption, we can see that the water consumption in the residential area, i.e. the municipal use, is the highest in Qatar. There is also the commercial and the government and the industrial. The municipal use of water is distributed like this: how much is for bathing, then personal wash, toilet, dish, gardening, and clothes, floor, car, and cooking and drinking, which is the minimum for cooking and drinking. The water with the trouble by source, it's like 49 for coming from groundwater, and 41 from desalinating water, and 10% is only from the wastewater, and that's in 2005. And now this is the distribution by sector. We did how much by, this is by irrigation, 59% used for irrigation, 39% for municipalities, and 2% for industry. The picture should be changed between 2005 and 2010 as the desalination water increased the capacity to reach 373 million cubic meter per day, and then that's increased to 180 million in 2005, increased from 180. So that's it's an increase about double between 2005 and 2010. Similarly, the treated wastewater was increased from 43 million cubic meter to 129 in 2009, and almost that's 300%, 3 times. If the groundwater is limited to 200 millimeter cubic, million cubic meter, then the total water withdrawal is about 702 million meter per year. The percentage of water withdrawal in 2010 can be about 53.1 from desalination, 18 from treated water, and about 28 from the groundwater. It's worth to mention that about a third of the desalinated water is going for the leakage in the water shadow here, water map in Qatar. The salinity of water in Qatar is at a risk. And here are the issue. The rate of consumption renewable resource should be less than its refurbishment rate. The municipal water supply depends almost completely on desalinated water, and the desalinating process is energy intensive and costly. The fuel consumed is natural gas, is also finite, and because it's not renewable. The rate of consumed non-renewable resources should be less than the rate of developing another alternative, while here there is no alternative yet used in desalination in Qatar. With height, of course, using the fossil fuel or the natural gas will keep increasing the green gas emission. The polluting gases should be treated to reduce its harmful, but still this is not the case here. And the treated water is being used, only 25% of the treated water is used, while it needs to be increased because it's generally around 60% should be used. Some measure to be considered: most of the wastewater treatment here is treated to the tertiary level, which is still not. There are some conservation measure not to use it in every application, while if we raise this treatment to quaternary treatment, then we can produce potable water quality to meet unrestricted residential use and industrial application required the ultra pure water. Membrane can be used. Please don't interrupt me. I know the time. It's just one. It's one slide. No, okay, that's why you remove it. And then we can use the ultrafiltration for this. And then consider the other few measures is to increase the natural recharge of aquifer by drilling well with a special design, including perforated casing and graded gravel. And then to decrease the losses between municipal water supply and the treated wastewater, i.e. to increase from 25 to 60%, and to expand the use of dual distribution system, one for the potable quality water for drinking and cooking, and the other for less quality for landscape, toilet, and flushing. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fida. It was a very valuable paper, full of information, which we are utilities. We don't have some of that data. Would like to now welcome Mr. Khalid Bashir to present himself and his paper, as we don't have any information about him. about the same subject. What I'm saying, the subject is wastewater treatment?
Treatment, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And Qatar Gas.
15 minutes session ما يتجاوز يعني.
Mr. Khalid has replaced himself with the other contributors of the paper, so they will introduce themselves.
Losing time.
Yeah. You have 15 minutes as per the schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mohsin Raja. I'm a senior environmental engineer at Qatar Gas Operating Company, and I will be presenting this paper alongside my esteemed colleague, Mr. Bushebri Al-Hadi, who is a lead process engineer from our company as well. Our presentation today discusses some of the challenges that Qatar Gas has faced and the solutions that we've come up with regard to managing processed wastewater produced at our LNG facilities here in Qatar. Qatar Gas's operations have expanded considerably in the last few years, from about 10 million tons per annum of LNG produced in 2008 to currently 42 million tons per annum. And this has been made possible through commissioning of 4 new LNG megatrains as part of our Qatar Gas 2 and Qatar Gas 3 and 4 assets. And these LNG trains are the largest in the world, and their operation has resulted in a correspondingly significant increase in Qatar Gas's processed wastewater generation, which has currently peaked to about 300 cubic meters an hour. The challenges that Qatar Gas faces in managing this large volume of wastewater are twofold. The first challenge is the increasingly stringent regulatory environment here in Qatar, which is gradually progressing towards a zero or minimum discharge philosophy, and with more focus on reuse and recycling. And the second challenge is technical. Managing this large volume of wastewater in a sustainable way per current regulations requires implementation of some complex engineering solutions. Here are a brief table of contents of our presentation. In the first part of the presentation, I will provide a brief overview of the regulatory challenges and drivers for wastewater management at Qatar Gas. I will then hand over to my colleague, Mr. Bushebri, who will provide us with a brief background on Qatar Gas's facilities, current wastewater sources, as well as the wastewater management and reduction initiatives that we are currently working on. In this slide, I am aiming to provide an idea of what the key drivers are for our wastewater management and minimization at our facilities. It is Qatar Gas's long-term aim as a company to minimize water discharge and practice sustainable water use per best industry practices. On the regulatory side, there has been an increased focus from the Qatar Ministry of Environment to eliminate discharges of water to sea. Initially, Qatar Gas was allowed by the Ministry of Environment to discharge its clean process streams, which are basically boiler blowdown and steam condensate, to sea until a treated irrigation water network was implemented for all end users in Ras Laffan Industrial City by the RLC authority. However, Qatar Gas is now also evaluating other alternative options to the RLC irrigation network, including recycling and reuse of these clean streams as part of a long-term compliance action plan that we are working with the MOE on. In addition to the Ministry of Environment, the Qatar Petroleum also has been focusing on reducing the amount of water that can be injected into the onshore subsurface formations. This injected water is primarily produced water that we separate onshore from wet gas that we receive from our offshore facilities. And this has also required Qatar Gas to explore alternative use and disposal options for the injection volumes that we are required to reduce. This slide and the next slide provide a brief timeline on how wastewater discharge and disposal requirements have become more stringent here in Qatar over the past few years. In 2004, when we started construction of the Qatar Gas 2 and Qatar Gas 3 and 4 projects, we were allowed to discharge clean process streams to the sea until the RLC treated irrigation network became operational. Both of these requirements were incorporated into our megatrain base case designs. In 2007, RLC commenced work on development of this irrigation network with an initial completion forecast of 2011. In 2008, in the waste liquid injection permits that were issued to us by Qatar Petroleum, for our onshore injection wells, the injection rate that we as Qatar Gas had proposed was slashed by 37% from 6,000 cubic meters per day to 3,800 cubic meters per day. And QP is mandating even further reductions to these permitted levels currently. Due to these injection rate restrictions, the MOE, Ministry of Environment, reconfirmed in 2009 that Qatar Gas was allowed to discharge these clean streams to the sea. However, in late last year, the MOE prohibited this discharge in our annual consent to consent to operate renewals. And at the same time, the Ras Laffan Industrial City Authority also informed the ministry that the RLC irrigation network was not expected to be completed before 2016 due to project delays. Hence, based on these constraints, Qatar Gas has had to accelerate its work in evaluating wastewater reduction and reuse recycling options for both injection water and clean process streams. This slide just provides a brief overview of the two main process wastewater streams that we have at our facility. The first are clean process streams such as boiler blowdown and condensate regen water, which are essentially very pure streams, and they are currently discharged to sea per our agreement with the Ministry of Environment, and we are working with the Ministry of Environment to come up with alternative reuse and recycling options for these streams, and this is about 2,700 cubic meters per day. Then we also have produced and plant process waters, which we inject into subsurface formations through 6 deep injection wells. And this is about 3,500 cubic meters per day. And we are QP is mandating a reduction in these injection levels as well. And now I'll hand over the presentation to my colleague Bushebri, who will take us through the actual wastewater minimization reduction initiatives that we have in place.
Thank you, Mohsen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The second part of the presentation will give, I can say, a technical part of the study. We start with the offshore, a brief description of offshore installation, then the onshore installation, and at the end we will present a result of the feasibility study that has been conducted during the year 2011. First, the onshore installation consists of 3 platforms which transport the gas from the 3 platforms to the onshore installation through 2 pipelines. The pipelines are dosed with the corrosion inhibitor all over the year. During the hydrate season, we are injecting a KHI, kinetic hydrate inhibitor, in offshore 3 platforms. And also in QG2, MAC is injected in offshore and onshore based on ambient condition. All these chemicals end up in the onshore wastewater treatment unit and are injected in the deep well. The Qatar Gas 3 and 4 offshore installations are similar to Qatar Gas 2 with the 3 platforms. However, only a KHI is considered during the hydrate season. The onshore installation consists of upstream and downstream facilities. The upstream facilities receive the gas through 2 pipelines, and the gas, which is a mixture, 3-phasic water, condensate, and gas, the fluid is separated in the slack culture, where the gas is sent to the LNG megatrains for further processing and treatment. The condensate is treated in the upstream facility, and the water, which call it the HP water, along with the different stream of wastewater are collected in wastewater treatment and reinjection unit. From the present slide, we can say that if Unit 33 is out of service, all the 2 LNG megatrains are out of service. The wastewater sources in LNG megatrain. In LNG megatrain, we are using desalinated for wastewater as wastewater for fresh water, mainly for steam generation. We are having three different sources of water, which is the HP water, which are coming from the offshore. It contains KHI, MEG, and CI. The LP sour water, which contain only the H2S, which is produced in onshore installation, and the non-sour and oily water, which is free of H2S. The present slide shows the link between the water and the wastewater sources in LNG megatrains, where we are importing desalinated water from RLC. It is for different use. The wastewater treatment unit, which it is designed to collect a different stream, HP, LP, oily, and non-oily water in their respective flush drum, use a degassing to remove the H2S, then a serial of filtration and storage, and at the end it is sent to deep well injection. In 2011, we initiated a feasibility study with the 2 objectives. The first one is to reduce the injection volume by 50%, and the second one is to remove the kinetic hydrate inhibitor from the to remove the kinetic hydrate inhibitor from the HP sour water. Different strategies were used. First one is the reuse, which to produce the irrigation water with the minimum treatment. Second one is the recycle, is to produce polished water with advanced technology. And the third one is to consider only the HP sour water along with the different reject effluent to meet the injection spec. Out of these 3 strategies, we identified 12 options. Out of these 12 options, 3 were shortlisted, and here are the option 1, option 2, option 3. I'll try to be a little bit faster because I'm having only 5 minutes. Okay, here is we're having the different treatment applied for the 3 options, and the selected one is option 1, which meet the 50% injection volume reduction. Option 2 is not having enough, will be having too much cost for sludge disposal, and option 3 does not have a flexibility. The present slide shows the percentage recovery. Either we go for reuse or recycle, and we can see that the selected one, option 1, is meeting the 50% minimum reduction. The present slide will give us the block diagram for the selected option where the different streams are collected and sent to multimedia filtration stage, then MBR, then ultrafiltration. It goes to activated carbon and then to irrigation water tank. If we go for reuse and if we go for recycle, we can implement an RO unit, then we produce desalinated water. The second part of the study consists of KHI removal from the HP sour water. Qatar Gas 2 and Qatar Gas 3 and 4 received the wet gas from two pipelines, as I said earlier. And during the hydrate season, we are injecting KHI and MEG, and also QG2 is injecting MEG, as I said, at onshore and offshore installation. The objective of the study is to remove the KHI with taking the consideration of 0.75%. Okay, 0.75%. Okay, I have to. Okay. A bench scale test was done with the collaboration of Texas A&M, where we have identified 2 bench scale methodology to remove the KHI from the HP sour water. The first one is the heating and centrifugation, as using activated carbon. We have a recovery of 91 to 92%, and the second one is the heating, coagulation, and activated carbon. Also, we have around 99 to 98% removal efficiency. The conclusion pathway recycling of LP sour water or non-sour water will enhance the sustainable reuse of wastewater. Otherwise, it will be discharged to the sea. Removing chemical from HP sour water will enhance the injection aquifer reservoir. And the path forward is we'll be having the 50% injection will be completed by 2015, and we are scheduling to have a pilot test by next hydro season to have the full-scale engineering solution for the KHI removal. Thank you.
Discussion.
Okay. Well, thanks are extended to the co-presenter of this informative presentation concerning wastewater treatment unit for LNG mega trains challenges, emphasizing technical aspects. Well, now it's time for discussion, and I would like to call on the distinguished speakers of this special session to proceed and join us on the stage here to open the floor for discussions. So kindly proceed to the stage.
Also, please note, because if we started late and there was some delay also from presenters, we have only 10 minutes for the discussion.
So we open the floor for the audience. If you have a question, but please be concise, because as has been mentioned, we have time. I think we can see some questions coming from the back here. Kindly introduce yourself, please.
Ahmed Murad from United Arab Emirates.
Not working.
Ahmed Murad from UAE University. Actually, it is good. I have comments and questions to...
Unfortunately, we cannot hear you here, you know, so the speakers...
I have actually comment and question to Carol from school. It is good, I think, to have a strategy for Arab water security till 2030. And if we look in the few slides that you presented regarding the water security, we found word calls and encourage. I see that such wording will not help, I think, to forward in the strategy. Now my question is easy. Are there any fund allocated to implement such strategy?
Is there a fund allocated for the strategy?
I think I got your question. The funding for the strategy. Actually, the Arab water security strategy was prepared in tandem with 5 projects that are also based on consultation acts that presented and were approved by the United States. These 5 projects have funding. For example, the regional initiative I talked about on climate change is one of the projects that has preempted the finalization of the action plan. It's a $4.5 million project just for the assessment. So there are funding tools being implemented. However, the action plan has as a line item priority funding mechanisms for making whatever the priority areas might be realized. So yes, funding is there. It's already started, but of course it's going to be essential.
She was the next one. She is number 2. You are number 3.
Professor Abdullah, number 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
The lady here.
The lady there.
Microphone, please. Bring microphone here.
Mic for the lady in the front. Yes.
Thank you. Khadija Semi from France. My question is related to the talk of the lady Fida, I think. And the question concerns quality of water in Qatar. I am interested by pollution of waters. Previous investigations of quality of water in Qatar, did they reveal any contamination of waters in Qatar? Previous investigations of quality of water in Qatar, did they reveal any contamination of water? Thank you.
There are different types of contamination. What
Chemical.
Sort of contamination
I am interested in chemical contaminants.
Pardon?
Chemical contaminants.
Chemical contaminants. Are you talking about on which source of water? Are you talking about the groundwater?
Groundwater, yes.
Oh, the groundwater is, well, it's something different, but it's also under monitoring, the use of the groundwater, and you can see that's the number of wells that I show you. Those that are exist in the industrial city are really under monitoring, and the water, not every groundwater you can use for irrigation. They don't, so it's under monitoring. So probably there are some from the industrial, as industrial contaminant, but mind you, I mean, the water quality that's for drinking or municipality use is really, I mean, here in Qatar is diagnosed as a very high quality and under high monitoring, please.
Thank you, Dr. Fada. Professor Absalam.
Abdullah from Sudan. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Walid and Carol, they mentioned that, I mean, water issues cannot be separated from the energy. I would like to know in what sense, I mean, we can't separate water from energy, because water is a basic human needs for everybody. And I believe this is one of the responsibility of the government, I mean, to provide water for everybody. The other thing is that, I mean, how can we encourage the private sectors to provide such or to come into this very, very important area and to try to provide services of water supply for the inhabitants in any of these countries. I mean, what is the means that we can, by which we can encourage such a private sector to come into such area? Thank you very much.
Dr. Walid, will you give an answer to this?
Yes. Well, I cannot agree more. Of course, water is a basic human rights issue, and whether it's from ethics, from religious point of view, or from necessity of life point of view, we cannot agree more. As far as the energy input into the water sector, as you know, I mean, I live in the Dubai, and if I don't have electricity, immediately I don't have water. So I need electricity to pump water to the people, to the houses, to the services. I need it also for the treatment. I need it for the production. I need it for the wastewater treatment. So I mean, in any aspect of water, whether it is from production wells all the way to desalination treatment, all the way to pumping into the houses of people, you need. Here in the Gulf, you see the relationship so obvious. As I told you, if I don't have electricity, immediately I don't have water in my home. As far as the private sector is concerned, to get involved in this, I think, as you know, private sector means business. And if there is a business model or a business case for the private sector to come into the services, they will adapt. In Saudi Arabia, for example, now there is already private sector companies, national private sector companies being set up basically to, for example, for the wastewater treatment in Saudi Arabia. And as you know, for example, the services of water in Jordan, it's by, it's done by also a private sector company. At the end of the day, I mean, there is a business model from a point of view that the company can make a profit. Obviously, they can be part of this.
Okay, we take only one last question now. This was here first.
Ralph. Okay.
Yeah, this. And then we have this other activity.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ralph Klingbeil, Regional Advisor, UNESCO for Environment and Water. I have a question for Qatar Gas. I'm actually interested a bit to know more about the challenges, and it was a very good, interesting presentation. One aspect you mentioned that the treated water or the processed water is actually clean, but I understand it has a very high temperature. So from my understanding of clean or not clean, it has a different temperature than the environment in which you're introducing it. And that's what is the environmental concern. The second point on that, you also talked about re-injecting water in the ground. What kind of formations are you pumping it in? The same formations you're withdrawing from, like within the process, or is it a different formation? Thank you.
The first question is about you said about difference in the temperature in the.
Yeah, I understand that the water which you actually are discharging to the sea has a higher temperature. It's clean, but it has a higher temperature than the environment.
Okay, this is Qatar Gas is having a three asset: Qatar Gas 1, Qatar Gas 2, Qatar Gas 3, and 4. Now, what we have present here is only Qatar Gas 2 and Qatar Gas 3 and 4. For time being, what we are discharging to the sea is the clean water, which is the boiler, blowdown, and the polisher water, which was additional to the original project. Now, what we are injecting in the deep well injection to the aquifer is the HP sour water, the LP sour water, and the oily water. Those three streams are partially treated in the Unit 33 wastewater treatment and reinjected in the deep well. The study that we have initiated in 2011 is to reduce the injection volume by 50% from the injection in the aquifer, and to remove the KHI from the HP sour water, which is identified to be harmful to the aquifer reservoir. Does this answer your question? Okay, we can discuss it. Okay.
No sound. Oh, it's working.
Well, I'm afraid then it has to be, if there is more declaration about this or clarification, then it has to be maybe in the break. Well, by this, actually, we approach the final destination of concluding. But before this conclusion, we have here certificate of appreciations for the speakers. So, speakers, kindly proceed to get your
Walid?
There is one
لا هم ورقة واحدة.
لا أنا لازم أعطيكم هذا.
لا لسه أوكي.
No, just maybe it is his missing.
لا they رضا they are both in one.
دكتور أحمد عبد الوهاب.
Can you present this again? Sure. You take it.